more than EN Express. Let's see. Topic number 1. Center to gather support to remove Justice Verma. This is about the High Court of Allahabad and the justice there, the judge there, where in a investigation, lot of notes were found in his home and they were burned down. So, in that context, center is gathering support to remove the judge. Okay. What is the takeaway? Judges Enquiry Act 1968. How is it different from the procedure for removing a judge? How is it different from the impeachment of the president? We are just going back to our basic textbook in Lakshmikant. This is the homework that you need to do. What is Article 124? 124 Clause 5. Okay, these are the things that I am expecting you to know. Judges Enquiry Act. Lakshmikant, basic Lakshmikant stuff, okay? This is the first takeaway. There are not a lot of articles today which require lengthier explanation, so probably we'll have a smaller class. But I'll tell you the takeaways from each of these articles just like every day. I am seeing some new faces today for the first time, and that's the reason I am reiterating the process again. Yeah. This special article is in the context of whatever we discussed yesterday, GI tag controversy, the Kolhapuri chappals, etc. Right? So this article is more like a case study. It's like a story in itself. So what should you focus on? What will happen if a particular product gets GI tagged? It is easier for marketing it. What do you mean by marketing? Taking a product to the world and help in getting an instant recall for that product. Whenever you think of Kolhapuri chappal, automatically it should be very familiar in the minds of the people. This article is about the story of people who are involved in that industry. What is the viewpoint that you have to have to read this? You are using this article for 1 essay, 2 ethics. How are you using them? There are certain parameters. For example, when you're talking about any industry and the problems therein, you have to tag it back to the social aspects. The social aspects of that particular industry. What is the social impact? On gender, on caste, etc. There is a topic, salient features of Indian society. You need to know what are the salient features of Indian society in GS1. Use this article, apply the metrics of salient features of Indian society. For example, caste, family, gender, rural urban migration, market as an institution, how it will impact a particular community. And then you can also view this article from the lens of GS1, globalization. See, because this entire controversy came into the picture because of globalization only. Globalization means it is a process. So when you are reading this article, use this article just as a tool. Don't try to extract information and put it in your notes. Use it as a tool to observe the patterns. How is a particular industry functioning And what is the social background of the people working in that industry? How will globalization impact that industry and change the social structure of the people who are part of that industry? These are the things that I want you to observe when you are reading an article. In the initial days, you may not have the perspective that I am talking about. That is primarily because you did not understand GS1 properly. If you understand these concepts very clearly, these patterns will become very clear. Okay, and this is also important obviously from GS1 art and culture. These are the perspectives on which you have to work out this article. Again, I am clearly mentioning the purpose of reading this article is not to take notes, but to use it as a tool to apply whatever subjects that you have already studied in the basics, and use those concepts, apply them as a lens or as a parameter to observe some patterns. Why are we doing this? Ultimately, this exam is about pattern recognition. Recognizing the patterns, parameters, the parameters for judging a particular topic. Based on those parameters only, you will be able to create and craft an answer, or better, a better way of preparing is understanding the permutations and combinations through which an examiner can set a paper on that topic. How you can use this in essay, how you can use this in ethics, how you can use this in art and culture. That why and how, two aspects. Why are we doing this and how to do it? If you train your mind continuously on those patterns, even if you don't remember the information today, when the time comes just before the exam, all these things will become natural to you, because memory is always short term, understanding is always long term. This is a marathon. This is not a exam where you can just like in your college start one day before and clear this exam. You can still start 1 week before the final exam and memorize things in a context, but to develop an intuitive sense of that context, it will take probably months if not years, depending on how consistent you are. Am I clear? That is the lens through which you have to look at this article. Pretty basic, nothing much to take away. The other day we were talking about how the 42nd Amendment Act, through which many terms were introduced into the constitution, into the preamble, we have introduced secularism as one of the words. So the article is about the spirit of the constitution. Are we secular just because the preamble said so? Were we not secular before that? We were secular. There were constitutional provisions which implicitly implied that we were a secular country, but having said that, the preamble made it much more obvious after the 42nd Amendment Act. So, what is the constitutional vision we have had? What do you mean by constitutional vision? What is the purpose of constitution in the first place? It is to resolve any conflict, all the while keeping in mind the diversity aspect. We always say this term, right? Unity in diversity. Okay. There is a small problem in the way we perceive this unity in diversity. Let me help you break down so that you appreciate this article better. The idea of a nation is not state. Okay. People use it colloquially in similar context. Two different terms. I will talk about diversity, nation, state, and then make a sense of this whole. That's when you will understand this article better. State is a socio-political philosophical concept. State. It is a concept which evolved with time. So is the concept of nation. Okay? State is a description which ensures legal legitimacy. What do you mean by legitimacy? See, a dictator can impose threat, use force, and scare people to control that population, to control that territory. But that leader or that dictator cannot be called a leader in the sense of our preparation scope. He can only scare them and get acceptance through force. When does a leader emerge? When there is legitimacy from people, when people accept. Okay. So, state is a systematized process where that legitimacy is ensured for controlling power. Okay, I'll again come back to the reason why I'm discussing all these topics once again, but have some patience. So, what are we talking about? State. State is a socio-political philosophical concept discussed in the context of creating legitimacy for our power. In the context of democracy, the state as an idea gained legitimacy because who is the source of power? People. We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, secular, socialist, democratic republic. We, the people. So the legitimacy concept comes from people. Right. So the state as a political concept has certain components which we have discussed multiple times, but again in the context of this article I'm telling you. A state will have population, certain population, will have a certain territory, will have sovereignty, which is the most important aspect, and finally a government. Sovereignty means having ultimate authority, where there is no one else dictating our choices, either through explicit threat of force or through implicit arm twisting kind of a strategy. Nothing is impacting our decisions. That is the concept of sovereignty. Okay, and this concept is linked to the idea of power. So in a democracy, who are sovereign? People. What is the government? It is the machinery that keeps this. Okay, this keeps this government. Government is the machinery that keeps this sovereignty and access to power set on a autopilot mode. Okay, this is the concept of state. How is it different from the concept of nation? We often hear this word nation state in the context of world history. Nation state. Nation as a concept is linked to an identity. And this gained traction just before the World War I as a political concept. So, you are creating a state based on an identity. For example, Germans or the present conflict, Israel and Palestine. It's based on an identity. So the source of power or the legitimacy there comes from the idea of nationality and nationalism. Okay? You've already discussed this concept of nationalism very elaborately. If you haven't watched it, please go back to my YouTube channel and check it once again. But this nationalism, what does it mean? Ism is an ideology. Nationalism as an ideology talks about promoting the identity of a nation or the values that it stands for. So, for example, Hitler's Germany had this identity that they are supreme, Nazis are supreme. So, they promoted. See, when you have that idea that one race is supreme over the others, nationalism as a philosophy or an ideology will try to create institutions that completely support that ideology only. Clear? So, this nationalism can become extreme when it is not inclusive enough, and that will lead to a concept called jingoism. Clear? Where did we start? We started with the idea of state. Before that, we started with the idea of unity in diversity. We were discussing about the legitimacy aspect. We were discussing the concept of power. We were discussing the idea of nation state. We were discussing state, nation state, nationalism. Clear? All these concepts are clear? Fine. Now, when you're talking about this unity in diversity, are you describing the Indian society? Are you describing the Indian society? Is it natural for us? Yes or no? How many of you say yes? Almost unanimous yes. Except one person, everybody is saying yes. Bhargav, why do you think this is not the case? Perfect. Diversity is the reality. When you say diversity, this diversity can be linguistic, religious, caste, race, region, in every possible way, even in flora and fauna, naturally. In every possible way, in every sense of the dictionary meaning of diversity, we are diverse. And that is the description of the reality of this country. There must be something. See, unlike the nation states of Europe, there is a concept called balkanization. Okay, there is a concept called balkanization in our world history classes. Long story short, balkanization refers to the breakup of countries on the lines of race. So the nationality, the concept of nationality was linked to their ethnicity. And this was the phenomenon before the World War, just before the World War One, World War One. So in Europe, the genesis of this whole concept of nationality, nationalism, nation state came into existence, and it was primarily linked to the identity aspect of the race. Germans wanted a separate state because they were believing that racially they were superior. Austrians, Hungary, even as recently as Nagorno-Karabakh issue, there is a conflict between two countries, Azerbaijan, Armenia. Again, the concept is ethnicity only. So diversity is a reality of this country. Unity is a logical necessity to survive. It is not a reality that we have in existence. It is not natural to us. If it is natural to us, we wouldn't be needing a constitution in the first place. It is an idea that needs to be nurtured, practiced through a system. It is not natural. Please remember this. Unity is a logical necessity for us. Maintaining and promote that idea so that we remain intact. When you have so much diversity, they have the reason that they belong to a single race or they have an identity that they belong to a single race or a single nationality or whatever. But we have so many identities. Depending on the context, if you are in politics, your caste will become an identity. If you are, in a different state, your language will become the identity. If you are in a area where religious pilgrimage is happening, your religion becomes an identity. And then if you are in a different place where your facial features are different, let's say for example you're in Northeast and your identity, obviously in the first look itself they can identify that you're not from that region. Your race becomes an identity. Your genetic diversity becomes an identity. So why are we discussing all of this? Because the article talks about basic funda, like why this is important to have secularism, etc., etc. But people cannot appreciate it in depth because they don't understand the purpose of the existence of this fundamental rights and all. If you don't know the why, the what will not make sense. Clear? So when you understand that the idea of nation in the case of India is unlike any other country in the world. When you have so much diversity, what is making us stick together? What is that idea of nation that India encompasses? What is that Indianness? We need to have some shared values, right? Despite having such diversity, why is it that we all get united in the case of an India-Pakistan match? What is our affinity to that idea of Indianness? There must be something that shaped our thought processes and make us stick together. And that shared values comprise what is today known as Indianness. But what is that Indianness? That Indianness is defined by our preamble of the Constitution. We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, secular, socialist, democratic republic, and to give to all its citizens justice. What are the other adjectives that you can think of given in the Constitution? See, you have to by heart the preamble. This is the first step, okay? That idea of Indianness is what preamble captures. It is like the why. The what is there in the fundamental rights, DPSP and the rest of the Constitution. So that the Western concept of nationalism is not entering into the ideologies of India, so that we respect this diversity, otherwise conflict and chaos is what ensues. So this is an article which is like a debate between the right and the left wing in India. But to arrive at a middle ground, to see the logic behind both the sides, you need to have a context, right? See, if you promote too much of left wing thought, where the right wing doesn't get any say, that will also lead to a conflict. It should be like the dialogue between ideologies. And the greatest thing about Indian Constitution is that it facilitates processes for that dialogue. What do I mean by this dialogue? Are we having chai pe charcha like kind of a situation? No. When someone criticizes, there is room for dissent in this democracy. And there needs to be those processes. But having said that, we also have institutions which correct. Let's go back to that case of Ashoka University professor where he commented that, you remember that, right? That in the context of Operation Sindoor, Ashoka University professor had the freedom of speech, Article 19, to express that the government is using Muslim women to, showcase that India is a secular country. And there were many articles when Supreme Court reprimanded, did not punish, said that you should not make any comments. All that Supreme Court said was, don't make any comments now. There were many article writers who were like, the freedom of speech is getting repressed and everything. Fair enough. But there should also be a counter view to that, right? What about the timing? What is the intent of expression of freedom? So that you don't feel repressed. You did your part, but we are asking you not to do it. We, as in the Supreme Court, is asking not to do it, keeping the larger interests of the nation and the world. When you are trivializing the career path, such an illustrious career path, yes, you are trivializing the success, hard-earned success of a woman to a religious identity. The remark itself sometimes showcases that the very patriarchal tendency that the professor was talking about, it's not like it's artificially inflated and placed just for that comment, right? It was already part of the system. She was already a part of the system. Sometimes this symbolism is important to build the morale of the armed forces. And it's right for the Supreme Court to intervene at that juncture and stop that person, because that comment is not even provoking a thought that will be constructive for the unity and diversity aspect of this country. The cause is above everything, right? Just because you have freedom of speech, the purpose of giving that freedom of speech is to build a dialogue around the larger cause of idea of Indianness. The idea of Indianness should not just stop at the shared values that we have had at the time of our independence. Societies evolve even after that. So the processes in the constitution should facilitate that idea of Indianness. So if the idea of Indianness just compassed this much at 1947, if it is the case, even after 100 years of independence, it's a tragedy. The shared values should keep on increasing because of our affinity to be a part of this country. A sense of belonging and a sense of shared identity should only get better and better, because from 1947 till 2047, almost 5 generations will, in the traditional sense, 20 to 25 years is one generation. So almost 4 to 5 generations are passed on. Do you think the first generation will have the same idea of Indianness? The 5th generation will have the same idea of Indianness as the first generation? It needs to be imparted, learnt. Otherwise, they don't realize history is important, not just science and math and all the subjects that will give us skills required for our jobs. This is the larger, broader context under which you have to see this article. I am not going to repeat this entire article once again, because there's nothing much to say. It's just the basic description of whatever you see in Lakshmikant, why it is important. But to really appreciate this kind of context, you will see multiple such articles throughout the year. But the larger understanding of the concept of diversity, the idea of a nation, the idea of a state, why unity is a logical necessity, why are we promoting continuously again and again and again, reminding people? Because, see, unless and until reminders are sent to you for your own classes, you sometimes tend to forget the very purpose for which you join coaching. Even if you don't get a reminder, sometimes people might forget. We are talking about an history that might have happened 75 years ago. And the 250, 300 years before that. This is not just about the colonial part of our history. Even before that, even during the times of um, medieval times, we have had foreign invaders entering into our country, plundering India's wealth, moving out. Some stayed back and extracted every piece of wealth that they could possibly. Of course, they did contribute to the local culture. This beauty, where the existence of the good and the bad, and the possibility of even learning and exploring the possibilities where you can learn the good things, ignore the bad things, is what makes India unique. We should do whatever we can to improve this idea of Indianness, not diminish it. And for that, dialogue, negotiation is very important between parties who are always in conflict. And even in that dialogue, the intent is to grow this idea of Indianness but not diminish it. And that is the beauty of our Indian Constitution and the whole rhetoric around it. Okay? Clear? The concepts are clear? Remember this whole conceptual framework the next time you are reading any article on fundamental rights. This is the lens through which you have to look at this article. Okay, moving on. Opening new doors for Parliament's library service, not really important in the context of UPSC, but in the context of governance, it's a very, very, very significant step. Our Parliament has many parliamentary committees. Each committee is supposed to add some value in terms of expertise that committee stands for. They need some support staff, right? And that ad hoc support staff, ad hoc means there is no permanent fixed structure that is troubling them. So this article talks about the LARRDIS, the Parliament Library and Reference Research Documentation Information Service. Okay? Read about that, self-explanatory, nothing really important. For your mains, it will be probably an example or one line. So just read what this is about and keep it in your, maybe write down in your Lakshmikant itself in the Parliamentary Committees chapter about this LARDIS. That's it. This article we have discussed multiple times. Is US imperialism a threat to the world? I would say in the present scheme of things, US imperialism is a threat to the US in the first place. Later to the world. Okay, this article is a case study of what is good and what is bad in the case of Tamil Nadu. What is the idea of health? See, if we have to appreciate this article, we need to understand the concept in its whole. Health. Firstly, is it a state subject or a central subject? What am I even talking about? Do we have a central subject? What is the official terminology? Union list. So when I am, in the class when I am saying central subject, it is just for our convenience. Don't write it in the exam as central subject. There is nothing officially like central subject. Okay. There are some blank faces. Okay, in our constitution, you have Article 246. Go to Lakshmikant, Center State Relations. In that, you will find legislative functions. Under that heading, you will see Article 246. Under that, you will see Schedule 7. Schedule 7 has three lists, namely Union, State, and Concurrent list. We are talking about a particular subject under the state list, meaning states are given the power and the responsibility to handle that particular theme. The theme of health is something that state government should take care of. And since we are talking about the concept of health and the broad framework behind it, we will be looking at the important case studies and try to replicate that. We know Kerala is a very good model for healthcare service. Every time you see some new disease popping up in India, on social media we will be seeing that usual comments that every new disease is starting from Kerala because they are coming from some other region, there is a lot of migration, etc., etc. They are as if they are giving the diseases to the entire country. The reality is the disease surveillance programs of Kerala are so strong that they try to prevent it before it spreads to the rest of the country. It's very likely that the same diseases, people from the same countries who are migrating away from Kerala, coming back to Kerala, are also going to Gujarat, Mumbai, Chennai, Hyderabad, Delhi, Kolkata, different parts of the country. But we do not have enough surveillance systems to see what is wrong there. So that's something that we need to pick up, right, from Kerala. Not just Kerala, any state that is doing well in terms of the entire healthcare infrastructure, we need to focus on that. What is the idea of health? What is the World Health Organization definition of health? Health is just not absence of disease. It's a state of well-being. Please note this definition down. If you don't remember this, let's put it like a mathematical equation. Health is equal to mental plus physical well-being, and not just absence of disease. We can write it like this. Health is equal to mental plus physical well-being, and not just absence of disease. This aspect is completely ignored in India. We do have laws, but it's still a stigma. But just because on social media there is a lot of discussion on mental health, there is also one extreme phenomenon where even the slightest discomfort is treated as a mental health problem. There is a difference between being sad and being depressed. Please do not equate both of them on the same lines. There is a lot of importance to this. Emotional resilience, GS4, emotional intelligence. This is a topic. There is a person called Daniel Coleman. You need to understand what is emotional intelligence. At the slightest discomfort, people say that they are depressed. That's not true. Depression is a very big statement to make. And most people who think they are depressed are not. They're just sad. So there is a conflict in Indian society where actually people who are depressed just brush it under the carpet. The next generation which is learning the importance of mental health overdoes it just to compensate for lack of responsibility, taking responsibility. I'm not saying this, I'm not putting my opinion, there are actual research papers which say this. So this conflicting existence of two generations which ignore mental health as well as physical health in a race to pass on the generational wealth to this generation who do not know what to do with it because they lack purpose. Their purpose was to build wealth. The generation before that, their purpose was just to survive. Now you will see a situation. Why am I talking about all of this? I'll tell you. The situation now is that there is a generation where there is a significant middle class. The middle class of today was once the rich of the previous generation. Right. So this class difference when you combine with the caste, is also impacting our health. This is the sociological aspect of governance. So on one hand, we have the younger generation who are probably not seeing a purpose. So they have mental health problems to a certain extent. And the previous generation ignores those mental health problems. They have the wealth to handle them, but not the mindset to handle them. This generation has both wealth and mindset, but they lack purpose, which is again accentuating this mental health problem. This is one aspect of it. The other aspect is the physical part. Evolution of healthcare sector. We started with a problem that mortality was very high. Life expectancy was very low. People did not survive beyond certain age. I don't remember the exact statistics at the time of independence. You can go back and check. But it has improved significantly now. You are living longer. It should ideally make people happy. But somehow, when you lack a sense of purpose, you live longer. You're only enduring that pain longer. And that is the perception of the next generation when you don't have a sense of purpose. So it is the responsibility of the state. When I'm saying state, it is not Tamil Nadu, Kerala, that state. The larger concept of state. The concept that we discuss in Article 12 of the Indian Constitution, where you are talking about the fundamental rights under Part 3 of the Indian Constitution. Okay. So, the purpose of giving these fundamental rights to citizens of that country is to ensure the state of well-being, to live a life filled with dignity. Dignity is at the heart of Part 3 of the Indian Constitution. When you don't give them the dignity, you are taking away the purpose of that existence. So, in a social contract between the individual and the state, it is state's responsibility to give them a right to health care because it is linked to their well-being. But do we have an explicit fundamental right? Despite COVID, we do not have right to health care. The fact that we are still looking at case studies and saying this is good, this is bad, and not having a fundamental right is the major problem according to me. We have not learned from our mistakes of COVID, and it doesn't seem like we are learning. There is a recent proposal that the state government of Telangana wants to reserve 25% of the seats for SC and ST students in private schools. Reservation is not the problem. The methodology of imparting education and inclusion through the private sector. There are some domains where profit cannot be the motive. I'm slightly diverging from the topic because it's relevant. For the well-being of citizens, education, healthcare, skills, these are all important, which builds something called the social capital required for the that community or that nation. These aspects cannot be outsourced to the private sector, which primarily functions on profit. All the state subjects are witnessing a trend of privatization of well-being, which is a ethical issue, GS4. The privatization of healthcare, privatization of education, privatization of skills, and this leads to exclusion of some certain segments of society. So when you bring electoral vote bank politics into service delivery just for appeasing, the very purpose will be distorted. Instead of focusing on the quality of public schools, government schools, we are moving away and giving admissions to kids, the next generations, Again, this is a twofold problem. I know we are supposed to talk about health of Tamil Nadu, but this is an article which you will only appreciate when you understand the larger context of why this is good. Okay? So, social capital is equal to health plus education plus skills and well-being. What you will see in the Human Development Index. Okay? A concept that is brought forth by UNDP along with the help of thinkers like Amartya Sen. In that larger context of well-being of a society, we are talking about health. Health as a part of Article 246 under the state subject. Under that, we're talking about social capital. This is just one of the component, but how do you put this in a context? You won't be able to put this in a context if I just summarize and leave. Right? So that is why I'm telling you the backstory so that you can do this homework. It will make more sense. So this whole HDI thing, we are supposed to ensure well-being through the involvement of state. When state outsources this kind of responsibilities to the private, what is the incentive for private to take care and do the responsibility of the state? Can you privatize military? The very thought of it is so scary. Then why are we not questioning when it comes to education? It is a reality that we all want government jobs, but we don't want admission in government hospitals and government schools. Don't you think that should be the idea? Promoting an infrastructure and a process and a system where everybody feels it is a good place to go. That is the case in most of the aspiring states like Scandinavian countries, where 40% of your income goes into taxation and nobody complains because so many things are taken care. Free education till 12th. Your government services, the last mile service delivery is so good that nobody complains that 40% of the wealth is taken away from them. The lack of accountability at every level and the normalization of this corruption is the biggest tragedy of Indian democracy. Even after such a horrific experience like COVID, there's no one asking for right to health. Even if it is made a subject, nobody cares. Electoral politics do not change when a party comes up and says that we will give you free health care as a right. Nobody cares because they're just not aware of the significance. What is the insurance penetration in this country? In our own vicinity, how many of your families have insurance? Very few people have insurance. They don't understand and realize. We are in a country where if you don't get any diagnosis after a diagnostic test, you feel it is like a waste of money. As if it is worth it if you get some disease after the diagnosis. Only then it is worth it, otherwise it's not. So many layered nuances that you see from attitudes of the society will reflect in the politics also. Anyway, coming back. We are talking about the health, physical and mental well-being and why Tamil Nadu is a good example. Because the structure of healthcare service delivery is in such a way that you have at the bottom primary healthcare centers, and then you have tertiary level, and finally at the district level you will have this best hospitals. So secondary healthcare, tertiary. If there is a snake bite in a village, do you think you have to run to the district headquarters? Or it should be ideally served here? It's an emergency situation, something that can be prevented. And even today, in many states, they will have to travel as much as 200 kilometers to get an anti-venom. And I'm not talking about some remote place in the northeast or border regions. I'm talking about the central land, the so-called developed states with highest contribution to the GDP. Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh. If not in terms of GDP, it's still developed, right? There are many districts, many remote places in Andhra Pradesh where a snake bite victim will have to travel for almost 150 kilometers to get an anti-venom injection. Sometimes there are no stock. Sometimes the venom that is available, anti-venom that is available is not relevant for the snake bite. People dying because of snake bites in 2025 is a tragedy. It showcases apathy. And you should not expect someone sitting at the center in Delhi to fix those issues in the very remotest corner of this country. That is why we have democratic decentralization. That is why we have 73rd and 74th Amendment Act. You are giving them power without responsibility, which is as good as having no power. You are giving them responsibility but no power. What is the point? So the reason why we have to appreciate Tamil Nadu healthcare sector is that it was able to deliver in all these levels, but still there are challenges despite doing so much. At the ground level, there is still almost, if I'm not wrong, 20% shortage. Okay? So go through this article, you will see the good things and the bad things in this pyramidal structure. What is the good thing at primary healthcare, secondary healthcare, tertiary healthcare? What are the challenges? Every state needs to be looked at like this. And broadly speaking, health problems, the physical health problems can be divided into non-communicable and communicable diseases. Communicable diseases can be fixed through vaccines. And the biggest problem in vaccine sector is vaccine hesitancy after COVID. You've seen how much resistance people have had for vaccines of COVID because they were scared. Equal number of people wanted to have vaccines and people are scared that I don't want to take vaccines. Lot of doctors, personally I've seen a lot of doctors, they did not take COVID vaccine even now. They were like, we will take prophylaxis, meaning we will try to cushion the blow by using some medication before that, but we won't take vaccines because we believe we are fit enough. And they knew something that the rest of the world did not, which was proven right when Pfizer came out with, saying that, we are not really sure what is the impact of vaccines. But since it's a global emergency, we had to roll out the vaccines. Again, there are two sides of the coin. They are right, and even if they are right in rolling out the vaccines because there was little time, it's only ethical to say that, okay, we are not sure of what's going to happen, but if you want to take it. But they did not do it. Across the world, they've made it mandatory. And making it mandatory and not having choice without explaining the consequences is a problem. Okay, so these are the things that you have to study from this article. Can the Supreme Court halt an act passed by a state? Judicial activism. This is a concept. Go back to your Lakshmikant. Go back to your Lakshmikant, read the judicial activism chapter, and in that context, if there is a case called Nandini Sundar case. You have to note this case, Nandini Sundar case. So, if there is an act made by the constitution, by the state government, what is the methodology or what is the modus operandi procedure? The word modus operandi means procedure. It is used in the legal context. Next time when you hear this word from me, remember that it reflects legal procedures, the standard operating protocol. Okay? Use this word in your answers, especially in polity. The modus operandi refers to the procedural aspects. So you will see the procedural aspects that are there in our constitution when you have questions like this. So when you see current affairs, the first thing that you need to do is go back to Lakshmikant and read that, or go back to the bare act of the constitution and read that. When I say bare act, always remember, bare act means original text of the Constitution of India. Just Google COI, you will get it. You can download it from Sansad TV, that is previously Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha TV were there. They were combined and now it became Sansad TV. Or any ministry will upload the bare act. So there is a reason why I am asking you to do this. When you read Lakshmikant, it is an interpretation. But when you read the original act, you will see the words for what they are and how Lakshmikant is interpreting them. Not just Lakshmikant is not like the only book that you will have to read. There are some other books like PM Bakshi, many other books are there, D.D. Basu. But since this book became popular, I'm referring to Lakshmikant because it captures your imagination. Doesn't mean that's the only book that will have everything well organized. Sometimes it is too hard to digest also. Okay? Go through this article only after you read Supreme Court chapter in Lakshmikant. Also read the bare act and then come back to this article. By this method, you will be completing both static and dynamic together. And therefore, since you are reading static topic, obviously it will take a couple of hours. And this is not a waste of time. This is a daily practice to link static and dynamic. And once you do this, you will reinforce this whole thought process. Whatever concept that I've explained in the last couple of months about the social contract, layer by layer I've added nuances. I started with social contract. Then I explained the concept of state. I mean, for people who are regular in the last 1 month, I'm talking about them. Social contract, concept of state, individual components of state. Then today we introduced the concept of nation. Not today, even before that we've discussed nationalism. Today, in the context of this article, we have revisited that. So when you add layer by layer to your understanding, when you're consistent, you don't have to remember anything. It becomes natural to you. In the fundamental rights aspect, you don't have to by heart. It becomes natural to you. And it's not going to happen overnight. It comes with a lot of patience, thought, practice. And this is how you have to read newspapers. Once this thought process becomes natural, you are looking at newspaper like a dictionary or a gym equipment where you use it and put it aside. And once you need it again, you need to have it in a single place. That single place is the Telegram channel, my Telegram channel that I'm talking about. Go through it, revisit it, time to time. It will refresh your memory. Okay? That's it for the day. See you tomorrow.